In this lecture, we're going to work on endpoints with dynamic routes. Thus far, the endpoints we've used have all been static. For example, for flight frequency count and loyalty points, these URLs or route paths are fixed and hard-coded. There are the query parameters, but these are in addition to the route path. Dynamic routes, however, allow you to add custom parameters within the route path itself. Let's take a look at an example, and then we'll explain when best to use these. Our airways serves 10 different cities around the world, and it will want to encourage its website users to visit these cities. The company will need an endpoint providing details and tips on what to do in the cities, and they might even dedicate an entire website page, or URL, to a city. A common practice in REST APIs is to include an object's unique identifier in the URL paths related to it. So for information about London, which has an ID value of 1, there will likely be a get method to an endpoint of the path /cities/1 or /cities/London. Or it may even implement both of these paths, both of which direct to the same web page. We will build the latter endpoint using the name of the city, and we'll return our description of the city. Naturally, we don't want to create 10 endpoints, one for each city, so we create this dynamic route endpoint, which allows a certain segment of the path, in this case the city name, to be matched to a variety of inputs, and uses this city name as a parameter called a path parameter. If this sounds complicated, keep watching and hopefully you'll understand as we build the endpoint. I'll start with the endpoint description, and which is simply to return a description about a city. Okay, we're not going to have any query parameters in this particular endpoint. As for the HTTP method, well, again, it's a GET request. That's because we're simply retrieving information, which is the description of the city. Now for the path, it's going to be /cities/ and now we have our dynamic segment, or our path parameter, which in Plumber is denoted by the less than and greater than symbols, and the name of the parameter in between. So we want our city name here. I'll just call this name. This clearly tells us that this endpoint returns data for one specific city, and that that city should be written in the endpoint itself, the city's name, as opposed to being a query parameter. Having said that, it is treated exactly like a normal parameter, and we do state this in the function signature. So one argument is one and only argument will be name, which is coming from the path parameter. Okay, do we need any parameter validation here? Well, this endpoint would not be invoked unless the name or some string was stated within the endpoint. So we don't need to check if the parameter is empty or not, because we know it's not empty and it has a value. Though we should implement the same check as before of verifying that the given city is supported by our airways. So let's copy that code from our previous endpoint. We can change the reference to city to name instead, because that's the path parameter name. And obviously I'm not changing this because this is the city column within the city's data frame. So if name not in our city's data frame, city column, we'll return this message. Okay, if it is a valid city name, we can now proceed with outputting the corresponding description value. So I'll say output the description, and description is, well, we're going to extract it from our city's data frame, So cities, description, and how do we find the index? Well, it's going to be where cities and the city column equals name. And of course, we want to convert these two variables to lowercase. And finally, we'll return the description for that city. Okay, let's test this. We'll restart our API. Now I'll type this request from scratch. It's a GET request again. Our server domain name is the localhost port 8000. So our URL is cities, and I'll try with London. So /London. Let's see what happens. And we get our city description for London. What happens if I try spell London wrong? We get our default message that says we cannot find that city. Also, if I type London in with a capital L, we still get our description, and all uppercase, we still get our description. So this is working well. So you might be wondering, how is this much different to the static endpoint? Because we could just as easily have created an endpoint called cities and used a query parameter called name. So the path would look something like /cities, and in the curl request we'd have question mark name equals London. There are a few subtle benefits to using dynamic routes, such as improved caching and search engine optimization, but the main reason lies with REST API convention. Path parameters are typically used to identify specific resources of the endpoint, whilst query parameters are used largely for filtering, sorting, or pagination, and are generally optional. Since we wanted to extract the details of one specific resource, or in our case, city, say London, this better suits a dynamic route. This is because London clearly identifies the key resource of the endpoint. Using name as a query parameter would imply that there are various cities called London, which is not the case, at least as far as our airways is concerned. In the next lecture, we'll focus on another example of dynamic routes, in which we define the types of the path parameters. Let's keep the momentum going.